When I was around 7 years old, my family and I moved into an old house. It was a really big house with 4 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, 2 living rooms, and even had a dumbwaiter. It was at least 80 years old and was in pretty good condition for a house that old. My parents both worked 12-hour shifts at a hospital and would oftentimes have to get a sitter for me. My current babysitter, who I looked up to dearly, had moved away over 2,000 miles to another state to start her career in law. Needless to say, I wasn't doing well because of it. She had been with us for over 6 years and even considered her as family. Anyway, with her now gone, my parents had to look for a new babysitter. We had lived in a town where there weren't many sitters, meaning there was a better chance for them to have low reviews. Thankfully, we had found one who lived in walking distance that had 4-star reviews, which wasn't bad but still convenient. Her name was Sandra, and she seemed really nice. She was 24, attended college, and was apparently really good with kids. We'd play games together, she'd help me with my homework, watch TV, etc. My parents got along well with her, and as the weeks went by with her as my new babysitter, I started to see her a lot like my previous one. While all of this was great for both my parents and I, something happened during a visit that would change my whole perspective of her. It was a Friday night, and my parents were on a weekend trip to the Bahamas for their anniversary, and I was with Sandra. She had bought me some pizza and sat down with me to watch SpongeBob to keep me company. We watched for about an hour or so before she tells me to get ready for bed. Now, I was never the rebellious type of kid, so I complied and went up to bed to go to sleep. I fall asleep almost instantly and probably slept for a good 2 hours or so when I woke up to a steady banging noise. It was pretty loud, especially from my room, and kind of sounded like someone hitting a hammer against a wooden door. I turn on my light and quietly tiptoe down the stairs to the living room where the noise was coming from. I descend into the living room where the light was on, and what I saw next will forever stay with me. Sandra had been facing the back door while forcefully hitting her head on it. On the floor was a small puddle of blood that was coming from her nose, as well as blood dripping down the door. Being only 7, I tried to process as to what I was seeing, but I was just simply petrified. I let out a loud scream across the house and got on the house phone to dial 911. I spoke with the operator, trying my best to describe what it was that I was seeing. All the while, I'm screaming at Sandra to please stop, but she didn't seem to care or acknowledge me. I'm still on the phone with the police, giving them my address and to please come as soon as possible. The police heard the banging in the background and arrived in minutes with 3 officers restraining Sandra. She tried to resist no matter what, leaving one of the officers with no choice but to tase her. They called for an ambulance, and one of the officers called my parents, letting me know the situation. That night, my aunt came to stay with me at her house until my parents got back. As for Sandra, she had been rushed to the hospital where she regained consciousness and suffered from severe injuries. According to my parents, Sandra doesn't remember any of it or what had happened. All she remembered was her on the couch with her phone when she felt dizzy and got up until everything went black. Till this day, it's still unclear as to what had happened that day or what it was. Either way, it's one of the most horrifying encounters I've ever witnessed. This is a story that happened to me when I was around 24 years old. I recently moved to Boston for an internship to help prepare for my field of study since I had just graduated from school. However, it wasn't a paid internship, and the money I did make was from my disability insurance. This meant that I had to find a job in order to make income. After days of searching for jobs, I finally found one as a part-time babysitter. I was good with children and figured babysitting wouldn't be bad for a first job. However, little did I know that those expectations were far from true. Ever since I had moved, I had babysat for a while now and have dealt with many different kids, but this kid takes the prize. I won't disclose personal information about her, but we'll call her Rachel. Rachel was around 9 and was the small blonde girl who was obsessed with dolls. She basically liked any type of dolls. Antique dolls, rag dolls, Barbie dolls, you name it. One time, I had babysat for her for 2 days as her parents would be out of town. She was nice, but wasn't very talkative and just mainly played with her dolls and tended to them. I would be staying in the guest bedroom, and, of course, there were dolls. I remember this one porcelain doll sitting on a chair beside the bed I'd be sleeping in. It was a very unnerving doll, the type where it felt like you were being watched by it whenever you moved. I thought nothing of it and just got ready for bed and made sure Rachel was asleep. It was around 11 p.m. and I had got ready for bed and went to sleep with ease. I'd say I slept for a good hour or so before waking up to the sound of something in the room. I wake up and take a look at the clock and saw that it was 1 a.m. The second I turned on the light, I take a look around the room and see that the doll's head had been rotated backwards. Thinking it was probably Rachel pulling a joke, I turned the doll's head and went over to her room. However, Rachel seemed to be fast asleep and didn't seem like she had gotten out of bed. I shut her door and go back to my room, and the doll had now fallen off the chair. I didn't even dare touch it and just shut the door and slept on the couch. When morning came, I wasn't gonna bother Rachel with questions about the doll, so I ignored it and waited for the parents to arrive. I got paid and left the house and refused to babysit for Rachel again. When they did call me, I simply declined and claimed that I had gotten another job. I haven't experienced anything paranormal like that again, and I have moved past it. This story has shocked me to my core ever since, and I've even developed a fear of dolls. Whenever I see one, I always walk away. When I was about 11, my family and I moved into a new home in Los Angeles. It wasn't anything too big, just a one-storied home appropriate for a family of 3. I attended a private school in the city and was a naturally socially awkward child. This will be important in the story later. I'd also like to mention that I have autism, meaning it was hard for me to make friends and interact with others. Both my parents were fully aware of this and had made me go through therapy and other medication to help me with it. While it did improve a little bit, I still had some challenges I had to deal with. Anyway, we had moved to Cali as my dad had other work there with a higher salary. This meant that he'd most of the time be working and not at the house. I mean, my mom would sometimes watch over me, but she worked too and would sometimes have to get a babysitter. My current babysitter, who I adored, had recently moved over 2,000 miles away for a better job. It was sad, but that was the reality, and we had to find another sitter. Eventually, my mom had found me a new sitter who wasn't like the old one, but was still manageable. Her name was Luna, and she claimed to be just 19 years old. She was nice, but had a few issues that I began to take notice from for the first few visits. While it wasn't anything too concerning, they were very much noticeable. At first, it was relatively minor things like twitching and loss of focus. However, these things began to turn into bigger problems, all the way from talking to herself to sometimes asking me weird questions. I could only assume that she had some sort of disorder and remembered feeling sympathy toward her. The first night I met Luna was when both of my parents had their anniversary and another time where they both had work. I'd say these tics didn't arise until the third visit of babysitting where I started to take notice. But the more she babysat me, the worse the tics would get. It wasn't until one night though, where she did something that really pushed the limit. It was Valentine's Day of 2014 and my parents had gone out in the city for a nice dinner. This meant that I would be home with Luna until they got back. For the first hour, she helped me with my homework and then we played a game. Things went well for the most part, and even though I barely interacted with her, I wasn't rude. I remember giving her a hard time when it was my bedtime that night. It was stupid of me, but keep in mind, I was an 11-year-old boy that didn't want to sleep. Eventually, however, I ended up complying and went to sleep without any problems. Looking back, however, I'd say I slept for a good few hours or so before I awoke to my bedroom door being opened. Thinking it was just a draft, I thought nothing of it and went back to sleep. However, that was when I hear my door open a little more and there was someone standing in the corner of my room. The figure then slowly walks over toward me, coming to a complete stop. At first, I couldn't see who it was, but as my eyes adjusted to the darkness, my light from my nightlight revealed Luna standing at the edge of my bed. I turn on my light and Luna immediately apologizes, telling me she's sorry and that she tends to sleepwalk. In her hand was one of my dad's power drills with the battery taken out. She went on with more excuses while trying to tell two separate stories about why she had it. Of course, being only 11, I had my suspicions, but it wasn't enough to see her as a threat. Later that night, my parents had come home and paid her. It wasn't until the next morning where I woke up and told my parents about Luna and what she did. They, of course, flip out and attempted to call Luna multiple times. My mom had also found empty bottles of her prescription medication gone. However, Luna denies any wrongdoing and police couldn't actually do anything since she technically didn't commit a crime. It all makes no sense, and it doesn't till this day. Luna never babysat for me again after that, and I hope I never see or hear from her again. I still will never know for sure what she was planning on doing with that power drill, and it still haunts me from time to time.